Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 199. I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed. Michael Jordan.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by TaylorSound.com. One of the most complicated problems I've had in my professional career is sound, and sound mixing, sound design is generally always very expensive. But Taylor Sound has come onto the scene and has done something pretty incredible. Like so many other things you have in the world today, now you can get your sound design online. They're offering flat promotional rates for commercials, music videos, short films, and any other video content that's short form. They're very affordable, and because you are an Indie Film Hustle Tribe member, we'll get 15% off your order. Just type in the word hustle in the post your brief section. That's TAILOR sound.com. So today on the show, we have a returning guest. His name is Joshua Caldwell. Now, his first episode, which was episode 121, is one of the most popular podcast episodes in the history of Indie Film Hustle. And I wanted to bring him back because that episode was called The Art of the $6,000 Feature Film. And he made an amazing film called The Layover for $6,000. And he really laid out how he did it and really was transparent in his entire process. But, I have a lot of times I have filmmakers and, you hear stories of these filmmakers making a movie for $6,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, but you never hear the story about what happens afterwards. What do you do after you make that $6,000 movie? Well, today we have an opportunity to see what happened. Joshua then went on to make a $100,000 movie. So we're going to talk about today how he was able to leverage his $6,000 movie and grow to a $100,000 budget film within a year or so of doing his first film, and his entire journey doing that. And also now how he was able to bring all the sensibilities and techniques that he did on a $6,000 film and apply that to a $100,000 budget, and how much more he was able to get as far as production value and just squeeze more juice out of his budget. So I really wanted to bring him back and share this very unique perspective on the indie film hustle, if you will. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Joshua Caldwell. I'd like to welcome back to the show Joshua Caldwell, man. Hey, thanks for coming back, brother.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Your last episode, what did I call it? The blueprint or the guide to a $6,000 feature film or something like that? Rethinking the $6,000 feature film, which was your film Layover, which was I found awesome and inspiring, and I think a lot of the tribe did as well. And then now you've got a new movie, and you've kind of just upped the game. So you basically took the model of a $6,000 movie and just added $100,000 to it, but stayed in the $6,000 spirit. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So tell me a little bit about Negative and how did it come to be?
So Negative's a spy thriller. It's the story of this guy named Hollis who takes a picture of this woman in downtown LA, thinks nothing of it, goes back to his apartment, develops the film because he's a 35 millimeter type of guy. And next thing you know, this woman is at his door demanding the film, demanding the negative, and takes it by force. And before they can escape or before she can leave, men with guns show up. And she's forced to take Hollis with her on the run, as you discover that she's basically she's now a former British spy who's being chased by one of the Mexican cartels, and for reasons that become clear in the film. And so it was this just kind of really fun, spy thriller road movie that I'd wanted to make, and it was born out of this idea I had in college, which was I wanted to make a short about a guy who goes into Central Park. He takes a bunch of pictures with his, a 35 millimeter camera, and goes and gets them at the 1 hour photo development, and takes them out and he finds a photo.
You're dating yourself.
I know, totally, right?
Right?
Which is weird because I don't feel that old.
I know. Yeah, same here. It's things have moved very quickly, sir.
Very quickly. And so anyway, so now you know why like you couldn't make this movie today. But anyway, the idea was he finds one of the photos and it's just a photo of this woman like staring at him, like through the picture. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. No idea where it goes. Never could figure it out. And, a couple years ago, I met this young writer, Adam Gaines, who he reached out to me about being on a podcast I was doing to talk about this like book that he was writing. And I read some of his stuff and I really, really liked it. And he had just such a great ear for dialogue. I mean, he had a real like Sorkin-esque quality to his writing. And I said, we should do something together. And a couple of months passed, didn't find anything. But basically I was like, I've got this random idea. It's the story of this guy who takes a picture of this woman. And I was like, maybe it could be a spy thriller. Maybe it could be like shouldn't have taken this picture of the woman and shit happens. I don't know what else happens, right? And I go, but it might be a cool short. And I've got these two actors, Katya Winter, Simon Quarterman, who I'm attached to do this other movie with. And I was thinking, like, just as an exercise, it'd just be fun to do a short, right? Just to like get our feet wet and try something out. He said, all right, let me work on it. So he wrote basically the first 10 minutes of the movie. And then scheduling didn't work out for whatever reason. But basically I told him, well, listen, like if we're going to go to all this effort to make a short, and this was definitely post Layover. So it was like, if we're going to go to all this effort to make a short, why don't we just make a feature? Like we already have the actors.
Amen.
And he was like, okay, sure. So then he went away and started writing, and I went away and did a series for Hulu called South Beach. And then I did another movie called Be Somebody for Studio 71 and Paramount. And then he came back with the script, and then I was like, all right, let's make this our next movie. But I want to do it in a very specific way. And I want to do it for very little money.
Very cool. And now how did you get the money? Because it's $100,000 budget.
Yeah, so it was basically I went to a company called Mar Vista, who are known for doing their bread and butter is doing Lifetime movies, but they've really started putting their attention and focus on doing some of these under $1 million, really different, exciting, unique, edgy type of films. And I had a relationship over there because of Layover, and they were interested in doing something with me. And we was having trouble finding the right thing, and I came in with negative, and they were like, we don't know. And I said, well, I only want $100,000 to do it. And they were like, oh, okay, well, we could probably do that. And I said, but the caveat is that I would like you to leave me alone. And I want to go away and make this from a production standpoint in a very specific way. I don't want to be dictated to in terms of how I set up the production of this. I said, that's fine. Just come back to us with a movie. And so that's what we did. And this was born out of the other two projects I had done. And what had happened was in making Layover, because we were lighting very little, using natural light, we were a very small crew. There was like just a ton of freedom and there was a ton of time, right? We'd show up to location. We'd put a China ball up. We'd start shooting. We'd shoot for 8 hours. We wouldn't be lighting for 4 hours and shooting for 4. We'd shoot for 4 hours or 8 hours. And we'd just get a lot of takes and a lot of material. We got to try things and discover things. And it was just a really great way to make a film. And then I went and did these two other projects, which had much bigger budgets. I mean, 150 times the budget of Layover. Right. And yet I felt significantly more constricted because I was told, well, you only have, in the case of the Hulu series, I only had 15 days to shoot 150 pages of material. In the case of the other movie, I had 12 days to shoot an 80-page script. And so you have, what happens is when you started getting into these under $1 million, $1.5 million scenarios, what everyone is doing is they're taking the sort of traditional production model that they know and love that you have on a $10 million movie, and they're scaling it down to your $1 million movie. But what happens is what you don't lose are the trailers. What you don't lose are the crew. What you don't lose are the equipment and all this stuff, right? What you lose are your shooting days. And your shooting days and time is everything in making a movie, as we know. And I just realized very quickly that when we were spending so long lighting, so long moving, so long going from place to place, trying to do so much in one day, that it just wasn't conducive to getting really, really great material. You just feel like you're a bit in a factory, and you're doing the best you can, and you're working within those constraints, which can be eye-opening and a learning experience for sure. And people are certainly capable of it. You hear all the stories about, I shot my movie in 10 days. It's like, that's great, and people can do that. I really struggle with it because I really like having time with the actors and to get the best that we can get. And I'm not yet in a position of working with, those actors that can come in. I mean, Katya and Simon are different, but like, prior to Negative, it was sort of like, some people struggled with like only having 3 takes. You needed more time with them just to get great stuff. And it's not their fault. Like, it's nothing wrong with them. You really wanted to spend time playing and trying things and letting them explore it instead of being like, you just got to say these lines and you got to do it a couple different times and we got to go. I felt like I was betraying them, the actors, in a way.
Sure.
And I just didn't feel great about the work that I had done. And so when I came to doing Negative, I was very specific in saying, we're going to do this a very different way. And I'm going to take away the things that I don't think we're going to need. I'm going to take away the crew. I'm going to take away the trailers. I'm going to take away all the trucks full of equipment. I'm going to take away all this stuff. And instead, I'm going to give us time. So in the case of Negative, for only $100,000, by the way, that includes posts. So it was about a $75,000 production budget. We shot for 38 days.
Over 6 months.
Over 6 months.
How did that work? So like, did you just like on weekends? I mean, how did you do it?
So we just sort of did it when we had the time. Like, it wasn't so much we had the time because we had a deadline when we had to deliver the movie, but we basically, so prior in the fall of 2015, we started shooting. We hadn't yet gotten the money. We hadn't closed the deal with Mar Vista, but I was like, we got to start because I have this other thing I got to do. So like, I'm going to start shooting all the things that aren't going to cost us anything. So I'm going to shoot the opening chase scene where we're downtown LA and we don't have permits and we don't have all this stuff. I'm going to do all the stuff that I know isn't going to cost us any money to do, or is going to cost us so little that I can like gap finance it. So we did like, we'd go, okay, let's do a couple days stretch and then we'll take a break. And then we'll do a couple days stretch, take a break. And then in January, we came back and we did like all the motel stuff, and then we took a break and then we did so we sort of like, we do these like week-long production gaps or production schedules. And then in between we'd pick off days here and there. So like we'd go up and do a lot of the driving stuff, which driving takes forever if you're trying to do it on a really tight schedule. It's just like, it takes time. So it's like, oh, we'll just do that on those days when we don't have anything else to do. And it was basically like, our crew was essentially myself, our producer, Will Borthwick, the 2 actors, and a sound guy for the most part. And that was it. If we were shooting nighttime or we were doing sort of bigger scenes, we'd scale up and we'd bring on a gaffer, we'd bring on, makeup or something like that. But for the most part, we kept the crew really light. So like all the people going out, I mean, we weren't really paying ourselves. So like everyone going out was basically, we paid a sound guy, and that was our cost for the day.
Because you own the gear already.
You own the gear. The car was mine. The actors, we already bought the wardrobe, so like we weren't renting it. And so a lot of those days were like $100 days, or $200 days. And then we do the other stuff where we're going out and getting a house in Palm Springs and Airbnb-ing it, and and you scale up, and those are the $5,000 days.
So that was another question I wanted to ask you about Airbnb. Do you actually just Airbnb a house and then just go shoot?
We did, but in this case, we did get permission from the owner.
Now, have you done that before? You just Airbnb and then just shoot?
Yes.
And now, what's the issue if you do that from a distribution issue? Because all of a sudden you Airbnb a house, you shoot it, and then a year later the owner sees his house on a movie. Is that a problem? Is that an issue?
It can be. I would suggest talking to a lawyer about it. Really what it does, it comes down to a situation where you just don't have a location agreement. So you technically didn't have permission to shoot there. It is in theory private property. And, is the owner going to sue? He might. I don't know. Like that's where your errors and omissions insurance is supposed to come into play. But they are taking the position that, they're taking the position that you have these agreements in hand and thus are free. So my feeling would be, don't do it. Either use Airbnb to find places, like that's great. It's actually a great thing. And then contact the owner and say, we're interested in filming. We're going to be a small crew. It's going to be 4 or 5 people. like you know, and then see if they might charge you a little bit more. You know, in our case, he didn't. But you know, it's one of those things where I would, if you have money, I would avoid trying to do it in a sketchy way.
Right. In a complete guerrilla way.
Yeah. I mean, listen, on Layover, we did it, you know, and nothing's ever come up on it. You know, we figured the movie was so small that nobody would ever notice. Right. And we've been right, but I can't recommend it.
Sure. Of course.
But it is certainly a way of doing it.
Now,
but my feeling is most owners are cool. What they don't want are 50 people coming into the house and trucks and all that stuff.
Right, of course. But if you have look, I'm going to shoot some stuff. It's non-pornographic,
right?
Which I'm sure you have to tell them that it's non-pornographic.
Yeah, you tell them that
it's non-pornographic, and you know we're shooting this movie, and here we are, and if you have a little bit of a track record behind you, you can send. Look, this is my website. This is who I am. I'm a professional.
Right. And you know, hop on the phone, like talk to them. Like usually they're cool, you know, and especially if it's a chance to make a little extra money, they just don't want the place trashed. Right.
That's all they care about. Exactly. Yeah. Now I did see some scenes in the movie that you actually shot in that Mexico. Oh God, what's that not Little Mexico, but that place downtown. What is it called?
Oh yeah. Well, there's the Chinese market downtown in Chinatown. And then there's the, it's a square. I forget what it is.
The Mexican square. Yeah, it's run right across the street from the train station.
Union Station.
Right. So I've been there. I've been to both those locations, and when I saw it pop up, I'm like, son of a bitch shot there. And I'm like, how did he? And then I'm like, oh, he must have gone there early morning and got some stuff. But then I saw you going inside, like where there's other people, other things. And obviously you don't have any permits because that's not cheap,
right?
Especially in LA. That's what I find your work so amazing from another LA perspective, because I know how difficult it is. This is not this is not Wyoming. Like
right?
Everyone's very savvy here, but if you keep a low profile, I'm just curious, how did you finagle that? How did you shoot in the Mexican Square and also in Chinatown? And like you even went behind the scenes some places and walked.
Yeah.
So how did you do that?
So you just have to be. It's the same way we did a lot of stuff on Layover. You have to kind of scout everything and have an idea of what you're up against, right? And so in the case of like the little square, the Mexican Square, we went up there and we had like. So the first thing we did was we shot this pretty much the whole movie on the Canon C100 Mark II. And I had basically the Canon camera, a lens, and a Shogun recorder because so in addition to directing this, I also DP'd it.
Right.
I had decided to shoot with the LUT as an overlay, and so with the recorder, I was able to see sort of approximately what the final image was going to look like, because the LUT I was using really crushed blacks, and I couldn't do it on the fly. Like I had to know what I was getting. So, but that said, it was still a very small, compact package. Where like if somebody was standing in front of me, you'd never see the camera. So we had that going for us. So the ability to sort of run around LA and just kind of like pick stuff off, was key because we were moving so quickly that nobody had time to even pay attention to us. And we had such a small camera and we did not have any boom guys or anything like that like, you couldn't help but you didn't draw attention to it. Yeah, exactly. In the case of the square, we actually went there and we didn't know that you had to have a permit. We assumed it was just public space, which it might be, it might not be. I'm not sure.
It's not. I've looked into it.
Right. So we basically said, okay, well, this is what we need. So let's just kind of like put the tripod down, and it was me, the tripod, camera, producer, and the two actors. And we started rolling. And then a guy came up, security guard came up, and he was like, oh, you need to get a permit. Oh, we didn't know that. We're sorry. Hang on. Like my producer, why don't you go find out what's going on? So like he's like, yeah, you got to go talk to this guy. So I was like, all right, well, we'll just stay here and you go do that. So like our producer went away to find out what the deal was with getting a permit. And in the meantime, we just kept shooting. I just kept saying like, just keep doing it. Literally just walk and then go back. Like, you have to have communication with your actors. You have to say like, you just need to keep repeating it. I will shoot it, but just keep doing. When you get to the end, turn around, walk back and do it again. And I'll get all the coverage of it, And by the time he came back and he said, well, yeah, normally you need a permit. Like, oh, we're sorry. We didn't know. We're just like film students, like fucking around. We don't really like, we apologize. We're just doing some tests. Just whatever the sort of BS answer is, and then you walk away and you got your footage. In the Chinese market, we just kind of walked through it and shot as we went, and nobody really paid attention to us. And we, just sort of shot these pieces that I then cut together later into this chase.
Now, with that, how do you deal with other people's faces and stuff like that?
You just you either cut it out or you just stay so blurry and so movement based that you just kind of get away with it.
Got it. Because that's always a concern if you're shooting in a public place. You got to get permission from people you're putting on.
Yeah, I mean that's what we did with Layover. Was we basically just I tried to keep it so that you didn't ever really see people's faces, or I just cut it out. Mm-hmm. So like if you see people's faces, we had permission from them. If you don't, then we didn't.
And the same thing for negative.
Same thing for negative. Yeah.
Okay, so if we see, because I saw some guy walk behind you with some iPod and he looked directly into the camera. I'm like, I wonder if they got permission for that. Maybe
it
not.
Depends. If you're in a public area, it's different.
Oh, okay. So if you're in a public area, you're
if you're in a pub. Well, again, all these things are like a little sketchy, right?
Yes, yes.
Like if you're in a public area, like filming on a public street, and you're like a small crew, usually you can get away with stuff, and like people assume that by being in a public area, you're being photographed. Like it's just something that you deal with. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't put it on TV. Like,
sure.
Consult all this. But in our case, we just, again, what we tried to do was remove obstacles that would put us in a position of not being able to make the movie,
Got it.
And so in this case, it was like, let's just go for it. If we end up having to blur his face, fine. We'll blur his face. Like, big deal.
Exactly. Or you recrop it or something like that to just.
Yeah. Exactly. In the terms of cases that were like more private, we tried to avoid it if we could. But if we couldn't, then we just hope that they're probably not going to see the movie anyway.
Exactly. Now, how did you light scenes? Because you move very quickly, and I'm assuming when you're out there and shooting without allow permits and things like that, you're not really lighting anything. So how did you light scenes that you did have some control over?
So we basically just used very small sources. We had a small lighting kit of like Kinos, 1x1 light panels. We would get we'd scale up and get a lighting package of like some Arri 650s and things like that. But the goal for a lot of it, especially pretty much during the daytime, we didn't light. We just used natural light. Mm-hmm. For any of the nighttime stuff, what I tried to really do was step into a location and say, because I usually would pick the locations for how they looked, right? We didn't go into any place where we're redressing everything because we didn't have a production designer. Mm-hmm. So like for the motel, in the case of the motel, right? Like the motel we owned, like we went in there and we got permission and we owned the entire motel during our shoot. But what we didn't do was go get a permit to do it. Right. Because we're up in the middle of the desert. Like, nobody's paying attention. No one's and we're a small crew. We don't have trucks. We don't have a big footprint. Mm-hmm. So nobody knows. No, if you drove by the motel, you'd have no idea that anybody was shooting there. Right. So what we would do is literally just try and make use of what existed. Like what was already there. And then what I did, and this was one of the reasons I also decided to DP it, was one of the reasons why one of the things that I was always frustrated by was certain DPs, and I love the DPs I've worked with, but still, is that they have a knack for refusing to shoot above 3200 ISO.
Right.
Even on cameras that can handle it. Sure. And I had a belief that we could push, certainly the Canon cameras, that we could push them far beyond 3200 ISO and still be okay. Mm-hmm. And what that was going to get us back was time. Mm-hmm. Because it was less time lighting, it was less time having to have crew stand around doing stuff. So I would go into locations and I would say, okay, like it's a little dim. At what ISO does this, as it is, work for exposure levels? Mm-hmm. So then I'd set it. If it was like 15,000 ISO, I'd be like, all right, no, we can't do that. But if it was 64, I would do that. And then I'd say, what do we need to add? So I tried to basically make use of what already existed in the space. And then we did either enhance it or take it away, depending on what the scene called for. Mm-hmm. But it was using a lot of practical lighting, a lot of existing lighting, and then, in certain cases, enhancing it.
Now, when you're saying practical lighting, are you adding photo bulbs in it, color temperature, corrected bulbs, or are you just using whatever bulbs are in the house?
Well, we brought our own bulbs because, you just don't know what works. But,
Right.
for the most part, you're using what's there. So in the case of like the house that they get to, Rodney's house, that was all just whatever was there,
Okay.
and then we would bring in a light or two just to help fill in or take care of whatever was there. And, in the case of like the motel, it was like, oh, we have a lamp here. Like, we'll just take the bulb out of here and we'll put in a bulb that we know is going to be consistent and work okay for our purposes. But, with when you're shooting at a high ISO, you don't need that. You don't have to go back to the 250 watt bulbs anymore.
No.
You can put in the 60 watts and the 40 watts and be completely okay. And so it was really trying to just be as fast as possible. So I'd say like in most cases we had, a couple of lights just helping to fill stuff in.
Okay. So like a lot of China balls.
Not even a lot of China balls. Like I actually kind of like some harder sources. So we found ourselves taking some like 650s and punching them through a window, and also lighting a space. Like it's always very important to me that we try and light as much of the space as we can, as opposed to lighting the actors on a mark.
Right.
Because I don't like confining my actors to a mark. So I like to light a bigger space and let them move within it. And have the freedom to explore and try things. And then sometimes you're like, okay, you got to basically stand here. But other times I try to be very open to it. So it was trying to use practical lighting. It was shooting at high ISOs. And it was just trying, because I love, for me personally, I love realism. I love having something be as gritty and as realistic as it can. And so that means mixing color temps. That means having imperfect lighting. That means having shadows. That means having all this stuff that normally you try and get rid of, because I find when you get rid of all that stuff, there's just an artificiality in my own work that I don't like.
Right.
It's just, I like feeling like we're there, and that means shooting more handheld, shooting grittier, darker, using things that are messy. I just like messiness in my own work.
Now with you basically handheld a lot of the movie yourself?
I operated the whole movie.
Okay. So then you were just basically just holding the camera? Did you have a handheld rig? How did you actually do it?
It depended. So if we were doing stuff on the down low, it would just be the stripped down version of the camera. No matte box, like nothing like that. It was basically the lens. And I would use the 24 to 105 lens because I could use the autofocus capabilities of the C100 Mark II. So I didn't have to worry about pulling focus. So in that case, it was that. In other cases where we were under control or weren't worried about somebody seeing the camera, I have a handheld rig, shoulder rig that I build up with follow focus, matte box, like the whole 9 yards. And then we'd usually operate off of that. And then occasionally we did some stuff on sticks, and then I did one scene with Steadicam, which I didn't ever do again. But
now with Steadicam or with a gimbal or
it was with a glide cam that I operated. But it just was like much harder than I thought. I mean, I've done it, but it was harder on this than I thought it was going to be. And I'm like, I'm just going to handhold this for the rest of the time.
Got it. Now, how did you record audio, which I know is a big thing? I know sometimes when you're out on the street, I noticed that most of that stuff is MOS or Nat sound. Right. So, we would either just go MOS, and know that my sound designers would fill it in later, or we would have them labbed, and then it would be going to a like H4n recorder that I would carry in a bag with me. So like the scene where they walk through Union Station, right? There's a dialogue scene there. That was that they were already labbed, and they basically just I just told them, as soon as we get in that great hall, you got to do your lines. So just do them once. How was it shooting at Union? Did they get any shit? Oh no, because literally what you see in the movie is the one take that we did. You just walk. You're just walking. We just walked. Yeah, we basically, the route that they take where they get on the train in Chinatown, they ride the train, they get off in Union Station, they get out, they walk through the tunnel, they walk through the Great Hall, and then walk outside. Like that was literally me just filming the entire time. Like we just did the route, and then I just recorded it. And then I knew I was just going to cut it up. Right, of course. But I just kept the camera rolling to keep all this stuff and get all this great, all this great material. And then we added stuff like the drone shots of the subway and things like that, or the metro. And so in that case, no, I was just like, listen, when we get into Union Station, you got to do your dialogue lines. They're like, okay. And we had them labbed and we got what we got. And I knew, okay, I'll stay on their back. So if we have to, we'll ADR it, I could add it in later.
So we do something like that. And then in other cases where we were under control or we weren't worried about anybody coming and, getting pissed at us or finding us, we basically we hired a sound guy to come out and actually lab them correctly and boom it and do all that stuff.
Now, did you actually just drop the recorders like in their pocket while they're walking, or was it all wireless?
It was wireless, and then wireless labs out to the recorder, which was in my bag. And I was like always right behind them. And then, they just had the labs sort of tucked into their pocket.
God, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like you're just hiding it. They're just always mic'd, and you're just like you're subversively like, okay, guys, I just needed to clap, like just do a clap really quick, and like whatever. But again, it's like you just get like you're taking a risk. I understand that, but like in low budget, I'm like, why not? Like, what do you have to lose? Like, you have to go reshoot the scene somewhere else. Like, all right, big deal. Like. People just don't care. Ultimately, they don't care. What they don't want you to do is messing up the space, messing with customers, like, or
whatever.
Be blatant,
they're being blatant about it.
Yeah, they're not out hunting you down after the movie's been made. Because, like, frankly, they don't know. Do they know, like, there was a movie Negative that shot in a parking garage and they had permission or not had permission? I don't know. Like, are there records of that? No. Like, I mean, there might be permit records, but I can't imagine they're totally complete. And I can't imagine that somebody's full-time job is going and watching movies and saying, did we permit that scene?
Right. Yeah. No one ever. Yeah. That never happens.
And also, frankly, like, what I've learned is with a permit just gives you the right to be there at that moment. It's not a binding contract. Like, you have to have a location agreement. If it's a public thing, you can get away with it. If it's not a public thing, like
the house
might track you down. They might not track you down. But again, it's like, do you want to make your movie or not? Like,
amen. No,
to me, it's like the old Werner Herzog thing of like, learn to forge.
Yeah, like he used to forge his permit. Like, yeah, he's like a permit or something like that. He forged literally, and he had like a military general in front of him or something.
Yeah,
like that.
Exactly. And so to me, really, what this is, and it sort of depends. Whatever your ultimate opinion of the movie, what I'm also trying to do is just provide I'm sort of taking the lead on a different way of doing things that sort of gets away from this idea of like, if you don't have money, you can't make something with scope.
Yes.
And a lot of that involves breaking rules and like, you know what, let's just do it. They're not paying attention.
No, I mean, I was when I was shooting a scene for my movie going up to the Hollywood sign, I was deathly afraid. I was like, it was just me and a camera and my two actors. And I was deathly afraid I was going to get caught. And then halfway up the hike, I'm like, there ain't nobody coming.
No.
You literally could bring a Steadicam rig up there. By the time they show up, you've got the shots.
Right. Exactly. And by the way, like, it's weird because cameras nowadays are just so small all over the place. They're just everyone is filming, right? Everyone is filming.
Vloggers, everyone's got something. Yeah.
Self-filming, like people it's just everywhere. And so it's just one of those things where people just have stopped paying attention. And, are you kidding me? Like, do you think like the bureaucracy of LA has somebody like really trying to find out like if you had permission to shoot?
No, exactly.
But that said, it's frustrating that LA makes it so difficult. I have a buddy of mine he's shooting a web series. Good friend of mine, college roommate. He lives in New York, and he just shot a web series. He was in Times Square with like a full airy rig, sound guy, the whole deal.
No,
and a guy in a mascot outfit. And I said, "How did you get away with that?" He's like, "Well, basically, New York has now said that like if you're handheld and you're not putting any equipment down, you can shoot anywhere in any public space.
That's actually
including Times Square.
That's actually the law in LA. I found out.
Right.
As long as
that's why I was able to get away with a lot of the stuff I got away with.
Right. As long as you don't put sticks down. Second you put sticks down, you're done. Then they got you.
And you're like under a certain amount of people. Like you can't have like 20 people around you.
Right.
Like
so
that.
if you're
4 people or something.
Yeah. If you got 2 or 3 people with you, and you're just walking around with a camera, you get away with a lot. And legally, you can get away with a lot. If it's,
legally, exactly. And so, but and the funny part is about my friend's experience, because you think Times Square, it's like impossible, right? It's like they're not going to let you do that.
That's an airy rig, for God's sakes.
I know. The biggest thing they got in trouble for was their mascot, who was like, he was one of those like furry characters,
Sure.
Like the Elmos.
Yeah.
He was not in the space that they were supposed to be in. Like, mascots that were figures in Times Square have to be in a certain space.
Right.
So a cop came over and he's like, you're not allowed to be in here. And they're like, well, we're with the camera. And he's like, no, the furry guy, he's got to go into the green box. And so like basically they just went over to the green box and they shot their movie. So it's like, so LA, yeah. So I did know that, but even just the permitting process in LA is such a nightmare. We had such a nightmare for another sequence that we actually did permit the shootout sequence, and it was just such a headache.
Did you? And you shot, but it was out in the desert.
It was out in the desert, but what happened was it was within a certain number of feet from a neighborhood, and
it has guns.
Because we were going to be firing blanks in the middle of the night past a certain time, we had to go to the neighborhood and we had to go around and do what's called a survey.
Oh, Jesus.
So you have to it's not getting permission. It's just literally going around and saying, hey, we're going to be firing off weapons, like, and dropping stuff at their door and saying, like, we just want to make you aware. Can you acknowledge that you've been told this?
And don't call the police.
Right. And so the funny part was, first of all, you have to go do this. And we found this out the week before we were going to be shooting. So I'm driving up to this area, which is like an hour and a half outside of LA, and doing all these like surveys. And you have to have like a 60% response rate, right? Like 60% of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, half these homes are like derelict.
Yeah.
And like nobody lives there.
Right.
And then the other half, I'm getting them and they're like, yeah, whatever. Like people are shooting guns up here all the time.
Right.
So they don't care. And then LA Film goes up and they put the notice of filming in everyone's boxes. Yeah. And then they charge you for it.
Of course they do.
And then we finally go to shoot, and we had a sort of down the hill from where we were shooting. We were shooting up on this mountaintop that was kind of this, like, it was sort of in a bowl, bit of a bowl, and sort of on the mountain that was close to the neighborhood. I mean, it was far away. It was like more than half a mile, but like we had an RV for actors and sort of base camp. And so as we started doing the weapons, we radioed down and we're like, do you guys hear any of this? And they're like, no, we can't hear anything.
Oh my God.
So like just ended up becoming this massive headache, and LA Film is just profiting.
Of course they are.
The ridiculousness, the high fees. So we're just like, fuck it. Like, why even bother? Like, it's like SAG, it's like, you don't have to go through them. Like, why go through them? Like, what's the incentive? Like, they're not helping you. They're not making your life easier. They're making it more difficult. And the only reason we did it was because we were doing blank fire weapons. So we owed a responsibility towards that process.
But if you were shooting
that we weren't going to try and shirk. But if we were just, we shot up in the desert so much.
Yeah, but if you're just going to shoot like airsoft weapons that have no sound.
Oh, you could get away with it. Right.
Like if you have nice recoil, put some VFX in and you're out the door.
Right. But you know what? I was like, we have money.
You have $100,000. Like, you're not making.
I personally wanted to. But a lot of the other parts of the film, aside from that shootout, those are airsoft weapons. So we went that route for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing that
when we were doing things subversively, and we didn't have like time, and we didn't want to hire a sheriff, and we didn't want to hire all this.
Oh God, can you imagine? And you had to hire. I'm assuming you had to hire a police at that night, or no?
We did. We had to have a sheriff come out.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And they of course, like, we had to dispute with them because, like, they were like, well, it's this much, and then he had to like drive back, and we're just like, but you, like, why you're telling us you're charging us more because you couldn't find a deputy within 60 minutes of like the location? Like, why is that our problem? And so it's like, it's everybody's got their hand out when you start doing stuff like that, which is why movies end up costing so much.
Right. And then that's why filmmakers can't make money, and then they stop making movies. Yeah.
So it's like, part of it's like, you know what, let's subvert the system a bit, in order to get the movie made, and let's see if what we can get away with. If we can't get away with it, we'll put a little money into it. But it was, it ends up constricting you in ways that I understand. I get it. But at the same time, like, why not try to do something different? No, and
you got to have that kind of pirate attitude about it, like kind of. I
think so. I mean, for low budget stuff,
you've got to, and that's what I love about your story with Negative is that you took that pirate attitude and added $100,000, because for $100,000 movie, $100,000 kind of action spy movie, and on top of that, though, if you would have tried to shoot this movie in the traditional standpoint with a regular crew and regular everything, you would have never made it. Never would have made it. Never. It would have been it would have been too expensive. You would have had to have way more of the budget. Or two, it would have been, the whole movie would have been in Rodney's house. Right, exactly.
It just because you end up paying for, the problem is, like I said, going back to that production model, what you lose is the stuff that ends up appearing on screen. You don't lose the stuff that's like surrounding the set. You know, the trucks, the trailers, the actors have to sit in their trailer and air conditioning and all this stuff. Like, you know, you end up losing all the time to get the really great stuff in the scope, you know. And in this movie, like you saw, it's like a road movie. I mean, we did the road trip.
Right.
It's just like a couple $100 to drive to Arizona and back. And meanwhile, we got all this great stuff. We got them driving into Phoenix. Like, we were able to get all these things that, like, in a normal movie, it would have been way too much of a pain for somebody to figure out how to do.
Now, and you also had a couple actors who were really game for all of this. I mean, in your experience working with actors, are they all, you know, that you've worked with, you know, you tell them right up about, like, look, this is what we're doing. We're doing this on the down low. We're doing this on pirate style, guerrilla style. Are you cool with it?
Yeah, for sure.
Because
and they all love it.
They do, don't they? They all do love it, don't they?
They love it. And so, like, you know, I mean, you know, like with Sebastian, who plays Sebastian Roche, who plays Rodney, like, we're like, yeah, man, come out to Palm Springs. We'll shoot you for 2 days and then you're done. He's like, awesome. You know, and it's a fun role. Mm-hmm. It's like a role he doesn't get to play. He gets to do a fight scene. Mm-hmm. You know, in the case of Katya and Simon, like, I mean, they were there from the beginning. They were there before we had a script. Right. I was attached to do another movie with them, and it was taking forever. And I said, would you guys like to do something kind of like Layover, which is they've both seen and loved, and that's what got me attached to the other movie we were doing. Mm-hmm. And which, funny enough, that other movie, which a couple $1 million, like, sadly it didn't work out, you know, as most things do. But in the meantime, I got them, and I said, would you like to do a sort of Layover style movie that's this spy thriller? You know, and I told Katya, I'm like, you're going to get to play a character that you're not getting pitched for and you're not getting cast for. Mm-hmm. And with Simon, it was like, you know, an opportunity to do a really different character, to work with Katya. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you know, we're just going to, you guys will have ownership of the film, and we're just going to go do it in this, like, really pirate way. And like you said, and they were, like, totally game for it. I mean, they were awesome. Never complained, never had problems. Even when we're in the desert in the middle of, like, you know, it's 22 degrees and freezing in January. Mm-hmm. Like, they were out there, like, doing it, and they were loving it, because what I said to them was, what you're not going to have is a trailer, and you're not going to have all these other things that you can get on the other shows you do. Mm-hmm. What I'm going to give you is time, and I'm give you an opportunity to really explore these characters, to really, like, be a part of this process, and to feel like you're going to leave each day feeling like never feeling like you didn't get it. Mm-hmm. You know, because they came from the world of TV, doing stuff where, like, you know, Katya on Sleepy Hollow, they do 3 takes and they're moving on. Right. You know, and so I said, like, we're going to take the time to do it, because what I do with the way I work, everything I do in terms of, like, you know, using existing lighting, not setting marks, using a lot of handheld, what it's all designed for, beyond a certain stylistic approach, is what it's designed for. It's designed to give the actors the freedom to do really great stuff. Mm-hmm. It's to not constrict them in any way. It's all about the actors. And then I step around the actors with the camera to figure out what the best thing is for the camera to do. Mm-hmm. But it starts with the actors and the blocking and the scene, and giving them freedom to move and freedom to try things. And then I capture that. That's what I try to do. Rather than try to stage them for a camera that may not be the place that gives them the most freedom. And then they're thinking too much about it. They're like, am I hitting my marks? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And of course, there's some of that.
Of course, you have to.
It's all designed to allow actors to try and give the best performance that they possibly can.
And that was the Kubrick model. You know, Kubrick did the exact same thing. He never have a shot list. He would just show up on the day and go, all right, let's work it out. And that was the other thing that he really wanted, time. You know, everyone always thought that he was this crazy man, but he wasn't. He actually just stripped it down to what do I need? And that gives me the extra 60 days that I get to sit here and play.
Exactly. Because that's what's the most valuable thing is. That's what everybody's always fighting for, right? Like, everybody, you're always on a clock. Mm-hmm. And if you can just strip away some of those things, like I don't think we ever shot a full 12-hour day on this movie. Right. And except for the fight scene, because we did it all in one day. Right. But I never left a day feeling like we didn't get it. Right. And I've left other projects feeling like we just didn't have time to really get it, you know, and I know that. And on this one, I was like, I don't want that to happen, which is why I approached it the way I did, and why I only went after $100,000, because I wanted enough money to actually make it, like that I knew we'd need to make it, but I wanted so little that whoever gave it to me, they weren't going to be able to pay attention. You know, they weren't going to have the time to devote to maintaining keeping an eye on $100,000 movie. Right. And they have the confidence based on your track record and what you've done that you'll be able to deliver. Right. In fact, the funny part now is Mar Vista comes back and they go, man, I wish we'd given you a little bit more money.
Right. Exactly. Like,
not because we didn't have anything, but they were like, what could you have done if you had an extra 50 grand or like, something like that.
Well, let's talk about the next movie then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we're doing.
Now, you talked a little bit about SAG. Can you explain to the listeners how you dealt with SAG? Because SAG can be a bit of a pain when it comes to filmmakers. They're wonderful for actors, but they can be a little bit tough to deal with.
Yeah.
So how did you approach SAG in this project?
So, I mean, I've always had a great relationship with SAG in the past. Like I've never really had any problems with them. I know people have, but I've never really suffered through issues except of like, I made a mistake and I didn't pay the P&H and I thought I did and like, whatever, and then they come after you. But in terms of this, I did the same thing that I did on Layover, which is I went through the SAG New Media Agreement. Mm-hmm. And they're obviously they're sort of cracking down because obviously people are taking advantage. But basically the premise is if your film or project is going to premiere online, then you're allowed to go through the SAG New Media Agreement. Mm-hmm. The reason why I go through it is, one, I don't know if this movie was ever going to get theatrical, mm-hmm. right? And it didn't. So good thing I didn't bother going through the theatrical ultra low budget agreement. Right, because it would have been a waste of time. Mm-hmm. So I go through SAG New Media because, one, you don't have to escrow your actor's fees, your actor fees. So so if you go through like ultra low budget theatrical, you have to take the same. You have to take 100% of your actor fees, and you have to reserve it to pay your actors, and then you have to take double that amount again, and you have to give it to SAG, and SAG basically holds on to it to guarantee that your talent is going to get paid. You don't get that money back until you turn in all the paperwork and you've executed all the documents that SAG requires in order to get that money back. On an ultra low budget movie, there's a ton of paperwork that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. I made that mistake on Layover. I initially applied for ultra low budget because I was like, well, what else do I do? And my buddy was like, no, do SAG New Media. So SAG New Media has very simple paperwork. It's very clear. It's easy to understand. Mm-hmm. They have a situation where you can negotiate the fees or defer the fees with the actors. Mm-hmm. Now, what I do is I don't do that because, one, we have money in the budget, so there's no reason not to pay your actors and not to pay your crew. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we basically pay the actors the minimum required by the next contract up, which is, I believe, the ultra low budget or something like that, which is 100 or 125 a day, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's what we pay our actors, even though we don't have to. And we do that because if the movie were to get theatrical, we don't then owe a bunch of money to actors in order to get that theatrical distribution. We basically can call SAG, we can scale up to the next agreement, and we don't have to do anything other than inform SAG that we've now had a theatrical, which changes how the residuals get doled out. Mm-hmm. The other thing is you don't have to provide proof of insurance. You don't have to provide like all these other things. It's a much simpler process to getting your movie made. And if you do end up getting theatrical, well, it's a very simple process of scaling up to the next contract, provided that you paid the actors the minimum that contract then requires.
Now, what about with the new media? Is there a residual situation there or not?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember if there is.
I don't think there is.
I don't think there is, but I could be wrong.
Sure.
Don't trust my opinion.
Yeah, always check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, the fortunate thing is like, with new media, there's also minimums like in terms of like how much you're spending per minute. That's like we never got close to. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so, but I found that SAG's always been very helpful. And I basically always start off with any project at this stage, these types of films, saying, I don't know if it's going to get theatrical. I'm just going to go through new media. This is the project. I log in, I sign up for the project. I provide the company papers, whatever they need. And they basically have, give me the docs and say, send it in when you're done.
And then did you have opened up an LLC for this company? This movie, I'm assuming.
Yeah, on this one we did.
Yeah.
So we opened up an LLC.
But but Layover, you did your own production company?
Layover, we did it through our own production company.
Okay.
My production company. Yeah.
Got it. Now,
so
just for protection, as far as
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's such a small
and this one we had different ownership structures. So what I did on this was, again, like myself, Adam Games, who wrote the movie, Katya and Simon, we paid ourselves a little bit of money, but not a lot, So, and I knew that going in. I said, this is not a project where we're all making money. So just to make everything fair, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to have a fifth ownership of whatever profit participation that we get out of Mar Vista. So whatever the money that gets made by the film, we'll split evenly 5 ways. So that also made it better for us to go through a different, go through a unique LLC, right, in order to just maintain that ownership structure. But that was also one thing we did, was saying I can't pay any money, but we all have equal shares.
Right, and they're doing it because they want to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
They're working actors.
I always, Mark Polish, who's a buddy of mine, and has we talk every now and then. His whole thing is like, if an actor asks how much they're getting paid, they don't actually want to do your project.
That's a very good. Yeah, I'm friends with Michael Polish, and and I talked to him about his movie For Lovers Only, which was you remember that one?
Yep. Yeah. That was an inspiration for Layover.
Yeah, and it's an inspiration. Yeah. It was an inspiration for my movie Meg. This is Meg, and it was just like, these guys just went out to Paris. Yeah, it just shot they shot an entire movie, basically just the two of them and her. Yeah, and occasionally the sound guy would show up. I was like, what? And they made $500,000 with it, which is not bad.
No, it's not bad at all.
I'd take it.
Not bad at all. Yeah, exactly.
Now you've got you said about 4 to 5 crew members were at the top end as far as the production. Can you break down what those crew members were and what they did specifically so people have an idea? Yeah, so I directed it. Mm-hmm. And camera. I DP'd it as well and operated. So that's 2 roles that I then took on. Mm-hmm. We'd have a producer, Will, who would show up and kind of help out. I mean, he'd do everything from slating a scene to, wrangling things to helping light. It was an all-in process for all of us. Mm-hmm. And then we had a sound guy who pretty much just focused on the sound, which is all I wanted him doing. Mm-hmm. And that was like the core group of us. And then I'd say that was like 60% of the time that was the crew. Mm-hmm. And Adam would come by set and he'd help out. And then when we'd scale up to sort of the next level, and that would include like having a guy who was a gaffer. So he'd come out and like basically help take on some lighting for myself, so I could work with the actors. Mm-hmm. We had our stunt guy, because we did a number of stunts. So we had this great stunt coordinator named Daniel Losacero, who's like, right now he's working with Tom Cruise on Mission Impossible 6. Like, okay. Awesome dude. But he was trying to get into coordinating, and he's a great fight coordinator. So like he ended up not only doing the fight coordination for the fight that's in the movie, but he also would come out and help with any stunts, that we would do. And then we would, on some of the stuff later in the movie, when Katya is like all beat up and bruised, like, we'd have a makeup guy who would come out. Did a good job, by the way. That makeup looked great. Great. Yeah. The makeup guy was so fantastic, and obviously did us a huge favor coming out with and doing some of that stuff. And then, let's see. And then, I think after that, it was like our big shootout day where we would have an armor, and we had a couple gaffers and grips like to come out and help move lights. That was a big budget day. That was the big budget day, big budget weekend rather. Yeah. And, but that was as big as it got. Maybe 10, 15 people total on set on the biggest days. And that was, because you were doing basically a full blown action sequence. Yeah, exactly. Now, can you give any, tips, like go-to tips for shooting on locations without a permit? That you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. Yeah. Okay. So you got to strip down the camera to as small as possible. Mm-hmm. You got to scout that location as much as you can, different times of the day, or at the time of day when you want to shoot. So you have to have you have to have a great understanding of what the scenario is in that location, right? If you're in the middle of the desert, fine. But if you're trying to shoot downtown, what's it look like? Are there cops around? Like, if you try and walk in and start shooting in Grand Central Station, it's like a heist. It's like a heist. Seriously, you got to case the joint. You're casing the joint. You got to case the joint. Right. And an example of this, right, is the scene in Layover where they're looking out over the city. They're sitting on the lookout. Mm-hmm. That was shot at the lookout over Mulholland, because that was the best point of view. Mm-hmm. Now, what I knew a couple things from having gone up there a couple of days and scouting. I knew that it was the last location on the park police route for when they closed down the park. I knew that the sun set about 8:00, and they didn't close it until about 10:30.
So I knew I'd probably have about an hour, hour and a half to shoot the scene, meaning I needed all the blue out of the sky, so like I'd have an hour and a half. I also knew that people were up there all the time and they were taking pictures and they were talking and they were all that stuff. So what that led me to conclude was I knew I could pull this off. I knew that the way I had to do it was I could only shoot their backs. I couldn't shoot any of the actual performance because I'd have talking and flash bulbs and all this stuff going off. And I'd have probably an hour to get it done. So that gave me a couple takes. And so I was able to go up there and shoot that because I had a very clear understanding of what the location situation would be when I got there. Right. So like when you're shooting guerrilla, no permits, you just got to have a really great, it's funny. You got to case the joint. You got to have a great understanding of like what the situation is going into it, especially if you're spending money to do it, meaning you got to rent a camera and you got to do whatever, and you're paying actors and you're actually spending money to like get out there. So that's also important. And I think it's also in the design of the film, which is don't try to do it with scenes that are 6 pages of dialogue.
Right.
You gotta go back to the French New Wave.
So no Sorkin walk and talk.
No Sorkin walk and talk, unless you're going to do long lens, and you're in a car, trying to like shoot out onto the square and
across the street.
What you get, across the street. No, you need to plan the scene so that you're not having to do takes. You're not having to do performance. Like the chase scene that we did, I never went back and shot the same area twice. Like I'd get one shot of this section, one shot of this section, one shot of this section, and we just kept moving. Just kept moving through it, and I knew I would cut it up. And I knew at the least I had a quick little sequence, that I could cut. I had something that I could cut up. Same with Layover in the club. We went into a club scene where we had permission to be in the club, but we had no permission to turn music off. We had no permission to change the lights. We didn't have permission to do anything. So I knew that would be the case. So I wrote a scene that didn't require performance and didn't require takes. So reserve those things, those scenes, the scenes where you're doing public stuff. Try and just limit what you have to accomplish, and then really know how you're going to accomplish it in a way that's not going to require you to do tons of coverage, multiple takes, those things that are continuing to draw attention to your scene. Also, another tip is don't have that like non-permitted location be the only possible place that you can shoot that scene.
Right.
So like in Layover, or in Negative, we have the parking garage, which they go to get the car. Well, I really love that parking garage because of the view of downtown LA and really wanted to use that one, but it could have been any parking garage.
Sure.
Right?
So no shootouts. No shootouts at Union Station.
Exactly. No shootouts at Union Station. Do not have your characters even carry fake weapons at Union Station.
Are you kidding me?
But the funny part is, so like and then you got to kind of, this is actually, well, I'll get into this after I finish the tips, but basically it's like, just don't have the location, the physical location, meaning like the specific location be the only place to shoot that, have options, because if you get kicked out of one, you don't want your entire movie or your entire scene dependent on it being that specific place.
Right.
So it's, to me, the biggest secret to like non-permitted guerrilla shooting, it's all in the design of your script and your story. It has very little to do with like production. I mean, because you're just taking a camera out and hoping you get what you get. But you need to be in a position where you can shoot a scene that is just getting what you get. And that comes from how do you design the script to be able to take advantage of that stuff.
Yeah, it's the mariachi style of doing things. Like, what you have access to, or what do you can control and ride around it.
Right, exactly. Like the car, for example, in our film, like, it's a Volvo station wagon. Why is it a Volvo station wagon? Because I own a Volvo station wagon. Like that's why it was. And I was just like, oh, well, Katya is like Swedish. She'll be a fun nod to that. And like, it just feels like an odd choice. And I'm going to go with it because it'll play in the movie as like an odd choice. It's just kind of funny, that it's like a very specific car. But it's one of those things where it's like, it's certainly using what you have, because if you own the camera, if you own the car, if you own the actors, so to speak, like you can go shoot whenever you want. We did car scenes just on a whim. We'd be like, hey, what are you guys doing Thursday? You want to go up and get this, scene 18? It's a car scene. They're like, yeah, sure. And that's what allowed us to really go out and get that stuff without feeling constrained by schedule.
Right.
And then we owned the drone. Like part of our budget was we just bought an Inspire 1 drone, and that gave us the freedom to take that out and shoot. whenever we needed to go shoot it.
The drone shots really add a tremendous amount of production value.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, I mean, that, again, key, right? Like your big helicopter shots.
Mm-hmm.
With these drones now, you can really take advantage of it. And it's just being really smart with how you use it.
And the quality of the image was really good.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and it was the standard, you know, a couple of them we ended up having that micro four thirds camera because Santiago Salvice, who plays one of the hitmen in the movie, he's also a filmmaker in his own right, and he has a whole production company, and he's like a actually drone pilot. So he did a number of the shots in the film, and then I also did some of my own with our own drone.
So it seems that the key to this is not to be afraid of dogma and not to be afraid of just trying to break the mold, because people are so caught up with the way they teach things in film school that you have to do it this way, this way, this way, this way. And I remember when I told people that I was going to do my movie, people in the industry, they just look at you like, what? Like,
right.
I'm sure you get that dog in headlights or that deer in headlights look all the time. Just like, what? They don't get it.
Well, it's funny because like I've had meetings where people have seen negative and then they go, we really, we'd love to do something like negative, but like, obviously we have like protocols and, stuff that we can't just like go do it the way you did it. I'm like,
why?
Get the permits. Like, I don't care. Like, if you guys need to protect yourselves, get the permits. I didn't get permits because I didn't have the money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, pay for permits. Like, I have no problem with that. Like, get location agreements. Do it all legal. I have no problem with
You're not against doing it like that.
Right,
You just
that's
don't
where your budget's going to go. What I'm trying to figure out in my own head because the other thing too, right, like is how do you scale up this model? And it's not necessarily possible, to suddenly shoot for 6 months on and off, although that's pretty much like what Mission Impossible does. Mm-hmm. But it's that kind of thing where how do you scale it up? And what I'm looking at more is how do I bring this style and this approach to scenes where I do have closed sets, scenes where I do have extras walking around, scenes where I do have control, and yet create a feeling of not having had control, because that really speaks to me in a unique way. But it also puts me in a position where I can always go and make a movie if I can get $100,000 together.
Right. Or if
that's what I've always wanted to protect. I never wanted to be really beholden to anybody else in order to go make a film, because that's your key. That's how you move forward. If you're always waiting on somebody else, then you're always you're never in a position of power.
Now, when okay.
So anyway, yeah.
No. So after Layover, you've got your agents at CAA, and you got a couple other jobs. How are you? Can you just kind of walk through the kind of blueprint of how your career has progressed from making a $6,000 movie up into where you are right now, just so people understand listening? They're like, this is, it's not going to be for everybody, but at least people could get an idea of like where you could go by just getting out and doing something.
Yeah. It's been a challenging path because I made Layover and a lot of goodwill came out of Layover, and I got a lot of meetings and a lot of, again, like negative came out of Layover. The exec at Mar Vista had seen Layover and wanted to make something with me, but it took 2 years before I had that project. So I got hired to do this series for South Beach, a series called South Beach on Hulu, which was like, again, like $1 million budget, like I spent 7 months in Miami, I got paid like way more than the entire budget of Layover, to like go and direct this thing. And it was, I put a lot into it, and I certainly made some mistakes from my point of view in terms of some choices I made. Stylistically, that I feel it would have made me feel better about the outcome of the project. But, I put my heart and soul into it and put a lot of work into it. I sort of, in the same time, saw sort of the limitations of the approach that we were taking. Not having control over the writing, not being a producer on it, not having, a sort of a say in how the money gets spent.
You're a hired hand.
Total hired hand, but it's a job. And I went into it going, great. Like it's going to be on a major digital network. It's going to have promotion behind it. Like it's going to get out there. This is exciting. This is cool. And then it gets finished and comes out, and there's a regime change at Hulu, so they're not paying. They don't care about your project anymore. They're not promoting it. The guy that sort of produced it, Dolphin Entertainment, like he's already made his money, so he doesn't want to put more money into it to like promote it, and it basically dies. I mean, literally, it's like a black hole. I mean, nobody has heard of this show.
Yeah.
Which is, for me, a bit of a blessing in disguise because I'm not really happy with my own work on it. But in a weird way, I've been able to fail without it having any kind of like impact on me.
Right.
But it was really disappointing to sort of see nothing come of it and feel like I was no further along in my career than I was before I had made it, except I had a little bit of money in my pocket, which didn't feel worth it. Which is easy to say when you have a little bit of money in your pocket, but like from an artistic point of view, it was a bit soul crushing, and it ended up sending me on a journey of introspection and meditation on my career and what I wanted to be doing and what does success mean to me. And I basically then later that year, that was June 2015 when it came out. Later that year, I got hired to do another sort of digital film called Be Somebody, which would be my second feature. And again, a job, and took it because to be frank, I needed money. And yet, did the best I could with it. I mean, I'm not phoning these in. I'm really trying to give myself to them and spent a lot of time rewriting it. But again, it did even though it got released by Paramount, it was one of those movies creatively where I feel like it was not set up for success. It just wasn't in line. It was more about getting it done. I had 12 days to shoot the movie, working with severe limitations, and kind of started to really go like, is this what I want to be doing? What's the point of this? Like these things where you're just churning it out and there's no real artistic nature behind it. And not that they didn't want that, but they weren't willing to provide the resources and the time to really do it. And then, and that really led me to doing Negative. And Negative now, it's interesting. I finished Negative last year in June. And so it's been now more than a year waiting for it to come out.
It still hasn't come out?
Still hasn't come out. Comes out September 19th.
Okay.
So it gets released on digital HD and on demand and the whole digital package. Netflix will come later. But it's available September 19th. So it's finally out. So my hope is, what does this turn into? But a lot of last year has been, sort of development on some digital series, working with CAA to sort of figure out the next feature, figure out the next thing. Me writing, I wrote a feature that we've taken out. I'm adapting a graphic novel now. And a lot of it has been me sort of stepping back from the sort of self-imposed pressure to produce that I felt over the last couple of years. I'm a guy who loves being on set. I love shooting. And I feel when I'm not shooting that I'm not doing anything. And I get itchy and I get unhappy and I get frustrated and I just want to go. And I think that leads me to places of working on things that aren't quite ready to be go.
Got it.
It's a quality issue now for me. And so what I'm trying to really do is now step back, find other sources of income. So I'm not beholden to just taking jobs to take them because I need the cash. And really thinking and working hard on those projects that I really want to be doing. Like, what are those things that really speak to me?
Right.
And maybe it means taking more time and taking more, and slowing things down and really finding those projects and those stories that I want to tell. And meanwhile, by removing the income question, I don't feel pressured to just take whatever comes at me, because I think I've done that twice now. And it feels like it's not panning out the way that it should have, right? Like you got to go, okay, I'll take this for the money, but it's going to launch me.
Oh, God. I made that mistake too many times.
Yeah. And in theory, like Be Somebody got me my agents at the CAA. So like that, something did come of that. And I got to say, my movie was released by Paramount. But it was a movie designed for a very specific audience of like, teen girls. Sure. And they love it. But it's not something where I'm like spreading, sharing that around going like, let me make your next thriller.
Right. It's outside the brand.
So Negative was also a course correct. Negative was me going, okay, I made Layover, which is not a thriller. I made South Beach, which has thriller elements. It's not a thriller. I made Be Somebody, not a thriller. I want to be making thrillers and action movies and like, dramas. And so, Negative was a course correct in that way too. Again, stepping down the ladder in order to make the thing that I really want to make because nobody else is offering up that opportunity and sort of proving that I could do action, that I could do fight scenes, that I could do, things like that I hadn't really done before. And not only that, but do it for $1. And so now, so Layover, making these movies has led to other things. And I can't say that it works. Again, the path isn't for everybody. But it is something where the fact is that with this industry, it's about what are you producing. It's always about what are you producing. What's your output? And you just got to keep doing it. And I think the best thing to be doing is to remove the pressure of Hollywood to begin with. Don't worry about Hollywood. Don't worry about all that stuff. Just be making it. And see, it's easy to say that when you're not working 9 to 5 and you're not struggling and you're not trying to get your career going. But I've been there, certainly. So I totally understand it. In fact, I'm not that far away from it. And, you're just not going to, you got to really take the time to think about the quality of the stuff you're doing. And are you doing something that's really going to stand out? There's so much content being made nowadays that it's really hard to be in the middle, and, yeah, so that's kind of a long diatribe on that.
Not a problem at all. Now, I'm going to ask you a few more questions. A couple of these I asked you last time, so I'm going to couple new ones for you. What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today, now that you've moved along another year or so since last we spoke?
It might be the same thing I said last time. I don't remember, but I think you got to make a feature.
Yes.
I just think that listen, you can go away and make those 5-minute proof of concept shorts, but very rarely are you getting to then make the feature, right? How many of those have come out? How many of those have gotten guys signed?
Lottery ticket.
It's a lottery ticket. You are far better off putting your time and energy into a feature, even if it's a low budget one, than you are making shorts or anything like that. Now, don't make a feature if you're not ready, right? Have the experience, make some shorts, get your feet wet, have an understanding of how not to cross the line, the basics of it.
Right.
But you're really, really making that first feature, even if it's a low budget one, even if it's made for $6,000, it's going to put you into that club that, is somewhat exclusive of somebody that's made a feature film. And if it's somewhat good, then somebody might ask you to make another one. But you shouldn't be waiting on that. You should make a feature. You should be thinking about how to make another one, how to make another one, how to make another one, how to make another one for $10,000, how to make another one for $20,000, how to make another one for $50,000. It's keep producing, and if it's not that, then be putting stuff up on YouTube. Right. Just keep making things. And but I think that I made what I thought were some really good shorts and really some high value, high production value shorts, and they didn't get me anything like Layover got me.
Right. And Layover was not an action movie by any stretch.
Not an action movie. It's not even in English.
Right. You really went against the grain on that one, but it worked for you.
The other thing I would say is that I think whatever you make, it's got to stand out. It's got to be almost so batshit crazy that people can't not watch it.
No, you're preaching to the choir, man. I completely and totally agree with you. It's so difficult for anyone to get anyone's attention nowadays. Because you can't compete with Hollywood. You're not going to have a $150 million P&A budget to get your movie out there. So you've got to do something different, and that takes balls.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I had talks with Layover, talks with Mar Vista, sort of about the promotion of the film, I was like, listen. Have you guys sold it all? Have you sold it to everywhere you can sell it? And they were like, well, why? And I'm like, well, I kind of think we need to be able to talk about the budget. Because, originally it's the whole idea of if you haven't sold your movie, you don't really want to talk about the budget because you don't want somebody to undercut, come in and go, oh, you made it for $100,000? Great. We'll give you 50.
Right.
Because you're underselling yourself. If they assume you made it for $1 million, then they're, even though you made it for $100,000, then they might give you a $500,000. Then you made a $400,000 profit. So I was like, can we sort of talk about this? Because I think the movie changes for people when they know how much was spent.
Sure.
I'm not trying to undercut the movie, but I think if you assume it's a $2 million movie, you're kind of like, oh, all right, I guess. You know what I mean?
Right.
You've seen it. But I think if it was made for, say, under $5, or that the budget was $100,000, it changes your perception of that film. And I think that's important, for me, for people understanding it, because I want want people to be able to watch it, not only just to enjoy it. And hopefully I made a great movie. But at the same time, I also want it to be a bit of a like lesson for people to be able to watch it and say, okay, that's what $100,000 movie could look like. Right.
Right. That's a very good point. Now, can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Ooh. Let's see. Well, okay. I'll give you the career one.
Mm-hmm.
So I read a book called, I might have already said this, I'm trying to remember. I read a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And it really delves into sort of the principles of Stoic philosophy.
Yep.
And which has been over the last couple of years, basically pretty much since after South Beach came out and died on the vine, has been a very serious pursuit of mine in terms of like coming to understand a different way of looking at the world, different way of looking at success, and the basic tenet of, you know, what is up to us and what is not up to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's radically transformed sort of my mindset and my perception of Hollywood and my own work and where I'm putting my time and how I'm valuing myself versus others and how I'm defining success. That it's really sort of opened up a whole other world for, you know, in terms of my approach to my career. That has also made me much more relaxed about it.
Right. Takes time to get that. It takes time to get relaxed.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, anything by Ryan Holiday is fantastic. He wrote a great new book that just came out called Perennial Seller, which is about why does a movie like Shawshank Redemption stick around, you know, 25 years later after it was made versus other things that just kind of show up and go away. And he's got another book called Ego is the End. I'm a huge fan of his writing to begin with, but like that book, The Obstacle is the Way, kind of really transformed, you know, sort of my approach to my career.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss. I'm assuming you know who Tim Ferriss is.
Yep.
Yeah, he's
big fan.
Big. Yeah, he's very big into Stoic philosophy.
Yeah. Yep, he is, and knows Ryan really well. Like Ryan's always on his podcast and talking about stuff with them.
It was called Obstacles on the Way. Obstacle is the way.
The obstacle is the way. Yeah,
it's very true.
It is, and it's just a great sort of starter for anybody looking to get into sort of the principles of Stoic philosophy and how it can sort of relate. You know, because I think Stoicism has a sort of bad connotation, but it's not that at all. And it's a really unique way of sort of like, again, like going back to Hollywood, like you're in LA, you're like surrounded by billboards of people's movies and, you know, friends that are having success and you're having all this stuff. And frankly, all that's out of your control. And if you're going to focus on all the things out of your control, you're just going to drive yourself nuts. You know,
which most people do.
Most people do. And frankly, I did too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's a very hard thing to fight against when you're constantly surrounded by it, you know, like, and so it's been a really sort of philosophical change in who I am and led to me making some big changes in my life, like moving away from LA and moving to some property in New York State and sort of having a much more calming presence and, you know, just focusing on my career in a different way.
And would you agree in the statement that generally speaking, when you are the most afraid of doing something, it's the direction you should be going?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's because, but less so like, it's a great marker. It's a great marker because I know it's going to be a challenge.
Right.
That's what it is. Right. Like I know that I knew negative was going to be a challenge. You know, there's other things where I'm like, this is going to be easy. Like I'll just show up and it'll be easy. That's what I'm always looking for as a challenge because that's where you get your best ideas. That's where you're focused so intently on it that, you know, you're so zoned into it that that's where you get your best stuff. So, you know, absolutely. I think that if it scares you, that means it's going to be challenging, which means it's going to be good for you.
Absolutely. Now, where can people find you online?
So the best thing is Twitter. My handle is at Joshua_Caldwell, Caldwell. You can branch out from there and find all my other places. And then negative is, like I said, it's being released on digital HD, iTunes, Amazon, all that stuff, and all on-demand networks on September 19th.
Man, thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. You're one of the rare guests that I've invited back. There's only been a
appreciate that. Love it.
I think only 2 or 3 out of 181 podcasts so far.
You know why? Because all your guests go from like the indie mentality and they all become huge, big guys and they're unreachable.
Exactly.
I'm not there yet.
or they're huge, big guys to begin with.
Right. Exactly.
No, but I appreciate you coming back.
I love talking shop. So it's always a pleasure to come on with somebody that gets that approach and that mentality.
Thank you again, Josh, so much for being on the show. Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you.
As promised, that was a fairly epic podcast and episode, and I want to thank Joshua again for being on the show and explaining how you don't forget your roots of where you're coming from. Even though you might have a bigger budget, doesn't mean you have to think like a bigger budget film, because you will get more out of not thinking that way. So if you take a $6,000 film mentality and put it into a $100,000 budget, you're able to get a spy thriller action movie that looks insane and has high production value, because you're able to go out and do things that you just wouldn't be able to do if you went down the mentality of trying to make a $500,000 movie for $100,000. The film Swingers, which is a very famous independent film starring John Favreau and directed by Doug Liman, is a perfect example. They had, I think, $150,000, and they said, why are we going to try to make a movie that we have a budget of $150,000 to make a movie, and we're going to try to make $1 million movie with that budget and make it look like $1 million movie? Why don't we take that $150,000 and make it look and try to make a $25,000 movie look insane and go down, as opposed to trying to go up, and you'll be able to get more out of it. And that's what they did. And it was, it did fairly well in its day as well. So just go down this mentality, guys. I think it'll be very, very helpful to you in your filmmaking journey. Now, this is episode 199, and next episode is number 200, which is going to be a special episode. I'm going to be giving you a little teaser about that episode, is how you can sell your movie using Facebook ads. We're going to talk to a Facebook ninja, and we're going to go deep down the rabbit hole on how filmmakers can use Facebook to market their films, themselves, their projects, and how to do it affordably, and how to do it right, and how to use the most powerful marketing tool on the planet. That is going to be the big episode 200, because I wanted to do something really cool and exciting for you guys, and something I know people will go back to and check out episode 200. And this was, I just felt so important that filmmakers understand this process and learn what Facebook and what marketing they can do on social media to help to get their message out. So stay tuned for that. It should be coming out this week. I'm working on them as we speak. And if you want links to anything we spoke about in this episode, just head over to our show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/199. And guys, if you have not had a chance to go and leave a review for the show on iTunes, please take 2 minutes, go to iTunes and leave us a good review. It really helps us in the rankings, getting more people to listen to us, and getting the message out on what we're trying to do at Indie Film Hustle and the movement that I'm trying to create and the tribe is helping us create. So just head over to filmmakingpodcast.com and leave us a good review. It means so much to me, man. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for listening. I hope this episode was of value to you. And as always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you in episode 200.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.